Hello everyone and welcome back. Okay, so tonight we are putting together a challenge lock. Now in the course of time that I've been making challenge locks, I've learned a lot of things over that period of time from some really awesome lock makers. And I thought I'd pass on some of those tips to you guys on how to make a better lock. And I was asked a few things, how I go about making my pin and pin, so I'm going to show you that. I did show you how I make some of my security pins, but I thought I'd go over how I make a pin and pin. And here, let me zoom this up a little bit more down here so we can kind of see what we're doing a little bit better down here. All right. So, all right. A few tips I wanted to pass on because I was asked actually the other day from a fellow lock maker that was making a lock, and he had a little bit of problem too. So I'm gonna show you what was going on there. But when I'm making a lock, I think drivers are most important in the security, giving you the most feedback in a lock, making it really fun to pick and everything. I think most of that comes from the driver pins, not so much key pins. Now you make a double spool or whatever in these key pins, unless you really overset that pin, you're not really going to make them come into play, I don't think. If you serrate a pin and you thread the chamber and everything, you're going to make it a tougher pick for sure. Maybe a T-pin or something, yeah. But, all right. So first off, I had a question the other day. I had a fellow lock maker, and he was making a lock, and he had serrated his key pin, and he threaded his core, and he said, hey, I can't get that key pin to fit back in the core again. I'm having trouble with the key and all that. Now, when you serrate these pins, what you're actually doing is you are taking and you are, I got it to focus down here, I'm sorry. You are taking and you're pushing out the metal, you're making it wider, you're spreading it out, so it's not going to fit in that chamber anymore. You're doing the same when you thread the core. So you're going to have a hard time getting that to fit back in there. I mean, it's going to be really tight. It's just not going to work. So what you really have to do, you have to take a little bit of sandpaper and you have to sand this down a little bit. There's no question about it. You lightly sand it, you get it to just fit in that chamber. That's what I'm going to do now for you. Let's just get that in there, and then I could go over a couple other tips. I don't have the camera set up at the Dremel yet, so let me do that. I'll sand this down, I'll get that to fit. Go over a couple more tips, and then we'll set up the camera at the Dremel, and we'll go about showing you how I go and make a pin and pin. So I'll be right back, guys. All right, so I've lightly sanded it, and you still have some good serrations in there, and believe me, they're going to get caught up in that chamber. So now you're not going to have a problem. It's going to fit right in there. And when you're using your key, it's not going to get all jammed up in the core. It's going to work very nicely for you. And believe me, they're going to get caught up in those threads. All right. Second tip I've learned, what you want to do is you want to see what kind of room you have left in those chambers, and that determines on what type of driver you want to make for that chamber. You have one with not so much room, maybe a T-pin or something. You don't want to try to make a spool, or maybe a very shallow spool might work. But if you get one that's like right at the shear line, basically there's not much you can do with the driver. You might as well just leave it standard, maybe bevel it a little bit, make it a little easier to overset, and yeah. But anyways, so you look at the room that you have left, and that kind of determines on what you want to make for a pin. And what you don't want to do is when you're making your drivers, you can't make them too long, because when you're putting your key in, you can see how these key pins are popping up. And I picked a very long one to demonstrate this with. If you have a driver and you try to put it in that chamber and you have a really long driver, imagine that driver in there with your spring. You're just not going to have enough room. You're never going to get that key past that key pin. You're never going to get your key past the key pin, because you're not going to have enough room in the chamber in your Bible for everything to work out. So you want to be careful on what size drivers you put in there. And then, like I said, you look at what room you got left, determines on what you want to make for a driver. This one here, I made it a serrated spool. Serrated at the bottom, so it'll catch those threads in there. And like I said, you know, if I made a bunch of spools up here, it's not going to come into play anyway, so there's no sense in it. So I made that one for that one. Had a little more room in this one, so I made a kind of a double spool, serrated again. Probably going to thread that chamber too. Fits in there nicely, and it'll come into play. This one here didn't have as much room, so I made it's kind of like a T-pin, but it's sloped, beveled, or whatever. So that one is for that chamber. And this is where we are going to be making our pin and pins. We have quite a bit of room in there. Now we have more room in this chamber back here, but I can't put a pin and pin in there. Because when you put a pin and pin in there, you're basically making a T-pin. And when you're making a lock, what you want to make sure in that core, you don't have these construction holes. Now if I put a T-pin in that driver and in any of these construction holes, I just lost the key pins. But anyways, if I put a driver in any of these, or excuse me, a T-pin in any place where you have these construction holes, and those are there for, you know, it's construction lock. Construction worker gets a key, it works in the lock, and then when the owner gets it, puts their key in it, turns it, and what happens is, I have a couple right here. These little ball bearings, if you can see those. These little ball bearings are in there. They make their shear line, and then they end up in these little construction holes. Never to be seen again unless you take that lock apart. So, you do not want to make a T-pin in there. So that's why I'm putting a T-pin here. There is no construction hole. I'm putting a pin and pin in here, which is actually a T-pin. And a pin and pin in here, which is going to be another T-pin. So, no T-pins where you have construction holes. Unless you fill those in really good with some JB Weld or something, I mean really good. You get a T-pin caught in there, guys, unless you get the top off your lock, you're not going to get that lock apart again. You might as well Dremel it apart, save your parts. But thought I'd pass a couple of those tips on to you. So let me get this camera set up at the Dremel, and I'll put those in the right spot too. But I'll get the camera set up at the Dremel, and yeah, I'll show you how I go about making a pin and pin, guys. I'll be right back. Alright, so we're here at the Dremel. Now the tools I use for making my security pins is not very much. All I use is, well, I have a coping saw blade with very fine teeth on it. Don't know if you can see that, but it has very fine teeth. Just a flat file. Regular flat file, and I do have a whole set of files, but I normally just use my flat file and a kitchen paring knife for fine serrations. That's where I get my fine serrations from. And then of course, when making pin and pins, you need a 1/16 drill bit. And yeah, that's basically what I use. And unless pin and pins, I do occasionally use a hacksaw blade when I make the pin, just to kind of like get rid of some of the metal. But yeah, that's basically what I use. And what I'm going to be using now, these Sparrows repinning kits are awesome. Reloading kits. You get a lot of good stuff in there. Besides the pinning mats and everything, you get a nice bag of security pins here. And this bag has spools in it. It has mushroom spools. It has serrated pins, and I picked a couple pins out of here for these pin and pins. And you also get a bag of springs too if you want to change up springs in your challenge locks and stuff. So the pin I chose for this one here is actually a mushroom pin. If I get that to focus for us, let me see here. Come on. Yeah, it's a mushroom pin. So we're going to be using that for our first pin and pin. So I'm going to move to this side for a minute. Let me get this in here. Now, making these pin and pins, oh, that one went a little too far. Making these pin and pins, I'm sure if you had a nice lathe and everything, it's probably a lot easier and probably a lot safer than making pin and pins. Alright, let's try that again. Put it in a little too far because the front of this is a little beveled. So I want to flatten that out just a bit. Give myself a little flatter surface to work with. Alright, so let me zoom this in a little bit for us. I will focus it. Okay, so now we're going to drill our hole. But like I said, first off, I'm going to flatten out the edge just a little bit. Give myself a little flatter edge to work with. It is rounded off a little bit. Alright, and of course we need to put on the visor. Alright, so here we, oh, drop my drill bit, but here we go, guys. You want some pretty good speed when starting this too, and it takes a steady hand, so let's see, can you guys see that? Oh, you can't see that. Let me see if I can get you to see that. Try not to block this with my hand too much for you. But just getting it started right in the center is the biggest problem. Actually, you need some good speed too when you're doing it. Trying to keep my hands out of the way, but it's very tough. See the hole there we're getting. When I start getting near the end, for me, it gets a little dangerous, so what I do then is I'll take this pair of pliers. Vice grips would probably be better, but anyways, I'll take this pair of pliers to finish off, because when it breaks through, it can be a little scary. Oh, I want a good grip on this too. There we go. We are through. Alright, so next thing we need to do is we need to make the pin for this. So we're gonna get this out of here. Put that over there for now. Put this back together. Alright. We need another pin here. I'm gonna turn this a little sideways for us too, because we're done drilling the hole. Trying to do this kind of quick so this video is not too long. Oh, we have a little problem here with the threads in this now. Gotta loosen them up a little bit. Yeah, sometimes when drilling those, I think the threads in there get some of that particles in there. I'm gonna put this key pin in this way. Trying to catch just the edge of it. Alright, let's turn this sideways so you guys get a better view this way now. And we are going to make our pin. First off, we're going to take off some of this metal that we don't need. Turn this up a little bit more. I think this blade's got a little dull from cutting for my pick. Alright. So I think we got rid of quite a bit. Then we're going to take our file. And we're going to finish the job. When you get it down close, what you want to do is test your pin. You don't want to go too far. This one here, I'm going to go a little farther, which I went a little too far with that one. See, I went a little overboard. Let me start that again because I want to show you what I'm going to do with this pin, and that one's not going to work. That's a little bit, I went a little overboard. Let me throw another one in there really quick. I was going to make 2 pins. I guess I'll just make the one. And then I will come back myself, make the other one, bring you guys back when all the pins are made, and I'll populate it for you and show you what it looks like all populated. This time I'm going to try not to go overboard. Oh, there went the pin. I didn't put it inside enough. Damn it. That one is lost. Guess what, guys? We're going to grab another one. It happens. The challenges of making a challenge lock. I'll make sure this one's tight. We're not going to do that again. And we're not going to make it too thin again either. Oh, how about we go a little tight, just to make sure. I probably got pins all over this room. Springs, pins, maybe a few C-clips. Alright, this time before, I think that needs a little more first, hold on. Alright, let's test it. Yeah, I think it's a little too big still. Almost. Okay, there we go. That's a pretty good fit too. So now what I like to do to my pins is I like to serrate them. So let's serrate this one before we put it together. I don't think I need one at the tip because I'm going to be shortening this pin. Now, just like in your chambers, this pin's probably not going to fit again. And it's not. See how tight it is? like I said, when you serrate a pin, it spreads out the metal. So what we have to do now is just take a little bit of sandpaper, and I don't know where my, oh, right here, there it is. And we still have a serrated pin, if you could see that. And now this should fit nicely. There you go. Actually, that is a little short, that T-pin at the end, if you can see that. So I might end up making this a little longer. If I could get a little more room out of this, or I'll take a longer pin, I'll make another one. Yeah, so we make that a little bit better. But one thing else I want to do real quick is make this pin a little more interesting when it is in the lock. We will take this spool. Oh, a little too far. Go back out here. Oh, maybe I could do it this way. I'll get it out of there. Alright, what I want to do with this spool, to make it a little more interesting when it's in the lock, is I'm going to put a serration right on the end of this. Not too deep, you don't want to cut it all the way through. Again, a little sandpaper. Now we have a nice little serration on that. Here, I'll pull it out. This end too, let me see. I'm going to focus it here for us. If you look at this end, where are we at? Trying to focus that for you. You can see I serrated that end. The other end's a little blown out, so I'm going to take and file that a little flat. You see where I got a little blown out from the drill. But yeah, we have a nice little serration on the end of that one now, and that'll make a nice pin. So I'll be right back after I populate this. Okay, I'm sorry if I broke away a little abruptly last time. I'm not used to pausing the camera and moving it around. But anyways, we have all the pins made up now for the lock. I did some modifications to the core. I'm going to show you, excuse me, I'm going to show you the pins all populated in here. Then I'll break away one more time, show you the lock working, and yeah. All right. Like I said, here, I'm going to show you real quick what I made for the pins here. Now I chose to pretty much, if you could see that, I just finally serrated 4 of the key pins, and I made a T-pin out of one of them. And I, here in the core where I had serrated the key pins, I also threaded the core. 1, 2, 4, and 5. So let's populate this, and I'll show you what it looks like all populated. I chose to keep 3 standard. That one is still a little bit tight, but it'll work in. Like I said, you lightly sand it, and as long as they go in, you're good. Alright. So, that's number 2. Number 1, right here. Alright. This one here, like I said, I chose a serrated spool. Number 2 is kind of like a serrated double spool, little serration there in the middle. Number 3 is kind of like a T-pin, beveled. Like I said, guys, don't forget, you do not want to put any T-pins in your drivers where these construction holes are. Extremely, extremely important. Alright, and this here is the pin and pin that you did not see me make, where I took a serrated commercial from the reloading kit from Sparrows, which is a great deal. You get the pinning mats, you get a plug follower, a whole bunch of pins, everything. I think I'm going to shorten that a little bit more, because the end of that might end up sticking in there a little bit too much. And like I said, if you make them too long, you could have trouble with getting the key in and out. You're not going to have enough room in that chamber. Might shorten that one a little bit more. And then this one here was the mushroom spool, which I serrated. And that one, I guess I'm going to have to, I might end up sanding that one a little bit more. It's a little tight. Well, maybe not. A little tight. And then both of these pins, you can see I serrated it. That one might be okay. Might not have to shorten that one. And this one here is a double spool. And that is your lock populated. And these two here, like I said, sticking up, I'm going to have to check them out. I might shorten them up a little bit. Like I said, you don't want them too much in that driver or up in that chamber. You won't get that key in and out, and you'll have a big problem. Might shorten those a little bit more. But this is what I chose for springs too. I chose a loosely wound steel spring, kind of a loosely wound copper spring, and a more tighter steel spring, a loosely wound copper spring, a smaller copper spring, and a double steel spring here in 6. But yeah, breakaway one more time. I'll put this together. I think I'm going to fix these up a little bit. Put it together, and I'll show you guys the lock in working order. So I'll be right back, guys. Alright, we're back one more time, guys. Yep, lock is all back together here. Works perfectly fine. Pretty smooth, actually, for the T-pins and the pins that are in there. And the key works pretty good, too. In and out. Pretty much no problem. Another little tip, guys. When your key is really got some sharp edges like this one had, I kind of like filed them, rounded them off a little bit. Well, kind of like this one here. When you get the really sharp edges like this one right here, you don't need that. You can file that down, or even at the top, all you need is a flat ledge. You don't need the real sharp points. So you can kind of like round them off a little bit, and your key will work a lot smoother for you going in and out of the lock. So yeah, this one here is a little tight, but still works pretty good. And like I said, the lock works very smooth. So yeah. Alright guys, if you if you learned anything from this video, that's awesome. And well, if you enjoyed watching it, that's cool too. So yeah, if you enjoyed it, please hit the like button. If you have any questions or comments on this, please comment below. And yeah, everyone, please be safe and stay legal. Thanks guys. Bye.